What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. We're continuing our CDL Champs preview series. We're down to 3 teams left in this, and I think these are the 3 probably best teams in this tournament right now. I'm not saying the other 5 don't have a shot to win, but these are the 3 most well-rounded teams. I think these are your main contenders for the event. We're gonna go ahead and start with LA Thieves, talk a little bit about their pretty good success on land this year and overall season success, what they're doing well here at the end of the season, as they are your major 4 champions. What do they need to fix potentially to go ahead and just round out a few rough edges if they want to go ahead and lift a trophy here at Champs? Let's talk about it. This is kind of an interesting season for Thieves and a really interesting offseason. You know, they picked up the Optic Los Angeles spot after the first year of Modern Warfare. Thieves get in and they bring back kind of that core of that OGLA team that was also the core of the original 100 Thieves team from the end of CWL. And last year they didn't have a lot of success, and I mean, I think we can talk about it in another video, but Cap got blamed for like 59 roster changes when it's not really his entire decision. Again, another video on that one. But they didn't really find like a solid footing. They were like a solid top 6 team all year, but they weren't really sniffing chips. So going into Vanguard season, they make quite a few changes. They bring Sam Octane over from Seattle after his reign's done there. They bring over Dylan Envoy after the Huntsman team falls apart. Some of those players move off to the new Optic organization, taking over the Empire spot. They finally give Draza a starting spot at the beginning of the season after kind of curving him at the beginning of the year prior. So you got this really good kind of more well-rounded team they had in the past with your Envoy and Draza running your kind of frontline subs. Kenny being sort of your bridge guy with Draza, and then Sam Octane holding down the back. And they get off to a really good start to the season, the Major 1 qualifiers. They go 4-1, up there in the top seeds with London and FaZe. Their only loss actually being against FaZe. They did a good job against Florida, New York, Paris, and Toronto. And at the Major, they actually play pretty well. They lose a tough game 5 to Toronto. Again, the Toronto team was playing pretty good at the beginning of the season. But they go on a pretty good run in losers bracket. They go ahead, they beat New York in the first round. They beat Minnesota the next round. And they lose another tough game 5 to FaZe. But at this point, top 6, not too bad for your first event of the season. And considering you lost to a team that made it all the way to the grand final. So FaZe Optic Texas, you know, maybe a little bit unlucky, but not a bad result to start the season. Unfortunately, Major 2 qualifiers don't go quite the way of Thieves. At this point, you know, they had played well in Major 1, but I think they were going through some role issues, and we'll get to that more sort of at the end of it when we talk about how well they played at Major 4 and sort of how that's cascaded. And they really couldn't figure out like the best way to use Kenny and Draza, and like the pace was there, but the gunplay and the S&D play wasn't. And they end up going 0-5. They lose to some teams they probably shouldn't have lost to: London, LAG, Minnesota, Optic Texas, and Seattle. And again, 0 points, and they end up actually being 12th, surprisingly, in overall seeding going into Major 2, which they don't actually get 12th in Major 2. To their credit, they actually pull up to Minnesota and play pretty decent. They grind out a game 5 against New York, and they do end up losing to Optic Texas, but Optic Texas is a strong team, and that was a really tough series for them. So they, you know, not starting a winners wasn't ideal. They got a tough draw, which wasn't ideal. But again, top 8, not the worst, not the best. You got something to kind of build on for the second half of the season. And this is where things started to really turn around for them, I think. And you know, again, they're previous to 2 majors. They were playing like decent, but not, you know, top level contender. I think Pro-Am is when things started to really turn around for them. They get into a pretty interesting Group C with New York, London, and Team War, and they end up getting second in that group, losing to a New York team that ended up winning the event. And they actually ended up playing the New York team later in the tournament. These went on a really good run once they got to knockout bracket, beating Boston and Texas, and they eventually lost to New York. But getting second at Pro-Am was big kind of step for them after the role changes, after kind of figuring out a few things internal to try and get better at some of the game modes. They have kind of a wild sort of Major 3 qualifier. They go 2-3, but every series they play is a 3-0. It kind of screws them a bit in the tiebreakers just because they didn't play and win a lot of maps in the series they lost. They had 3-0s against Boston and London, teams that were struggling a lot in this major qualifier cycle, but they did lose to Minnesota, Optic Texas, and Seattle. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but they are able to qualify for winners bracket, no harm, no foul. And they actually go on a pretty good run at the Major 3 event in Toronto. They beat Minnesota first round. They end up losing to FaZe in like a 20-minute series once they got to Saturday morning, but they get to losers bracket. They take care of business against Optic Texas, surprisingly, and they lose to the hosting team Toronto in a 3-1 series, but not that bad of a showing, to be honest with you. Thieves, you've improved top 4 at a major, and the top 4 teams this event: Seattle won, FaZe obviously finished second at every event. At this point, Toronto's the home team and just carrying that momentum, despite being, you know, having their struggles as we talked about in the previous video. So top 4 really good for Thieves. At this point, you're feeling good about your major qualification spot. You're still in the mix. You're on the right side of the cut line in terms of where teams are going to fall starting the Major 4 qualifier. And Thieves, again, good quality showing, walk-in winners bracket, keeping pace with a lot of the bubble teams in the Major 4 qualifiers. They go 3-2. They lose to FaZe and they lose to Florida, but they beat Boston, they beat New York, and they beat Paris. So a couple of bubble teams end up getting 10 10 points over. And this is the event they ended up winning, and we'll get to this more in a second, but they played phenomenal at this event. If you look at this bracket, like, and the teams they beat were very good. It's not like they got an easy run, right? They surprisingly beat FaZe on day one. They 3-0 smoked Toronto. Lost to New York, but I think that winners finals is a super emotional series, especially for New York. I mean, I was at that event, like the energy in the building. New York's going that crazy run to try and qualify for champs. You know, a lot going on in that building, and I don't blame Thieves losing that in 4. And they respond very quickly. Atlanta FaZe is beating Optic Texas, and both teams kind of coming off a big emotional series. Thieves are ended up able to get kind of the better of FaZe and close that in 4. And then they get to the grand final and they get it done in 8 maps and are your Major 4 champions. Take a look at their map records, kind of overall in the season, and it's solid, but we'll dive in a little further here in a second and talk about, you know, the Major 4 improvements. And you're looking like, okay, well, the team was pretty good at Respawn this year. S&D was up and down, went up 18 and 17 in series this year, so 500 ball, you know, how are they the 3rd seed? I think the biggest thing, you take a look at sort of how it breaks down in each stage, and like to me, like, especially at stage 4, first off, they were the best control team at that major qualifier, so that definitely helped having that locked in 3rd game mode. The biggest improvement this team made throughout the season, if you take a look at from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 and stage 4, is they finally kind of came around on their sort of S&D struggles that they had at the beginning of the season. They brought in Shane before the Major 3 cycle, and at that point they were really kind of struggling with a very shallow map pool in S&D. They were near the bottom, if not the bottom, in converting 4v3s and other situational, so like they were having a really tough time with sort of the adversity you face in S&D map and converting some of those situationals to win some of these big maps. And they end up actually like really improving that for stage 4, and I think that's probably a big reason why they were able to grind out the series against New York and have a really good advantage against the strong S&D teams like FaZe. And look, it even cascades to slaying, and this kind of speaks towards, again, further improvements they made in the second half of the season. Like these overall KDs for this team, which haven't made any changes this year, it's 4 guys, same 4 guys since the beginning of the season. Like only Sam's the one above a 1, and in fact, these really actually, if you look at this number, kind of a little bit of a rounding error, he's actually 2 kills off of a 1. It's like a 0.99. But either way, the thing to slice it is this team was 10th in Team KD for the Major 3 cycle, and they really turned it around on the last 2 events. I think the 2 key players from the slaying standpoint that I wanted to highlight were Draza and Octane. You know, Envoy and Kenny have had their own up and downs, but I think sort of for these 2, like they were averaging really kind of mid-pack 9.7s and 9.5s before Major 3, Major 4. But during the Major 4 cycle, Octane had a 1.12, which is very high near the top for ARs, and Draza had like a 108, which is very good for the role that he plays. And the thing, if you talk around the league to people, and this has been since the beginning of the year, they'll tell you that like when they were scrimming Thieves and playing them, like that team got really good throughout the season at continuing to play fast. Them and FaZe are probably 2 of the fastest teams in terms of team play. Like there are other teams like a London at Boston that play quick, but sometimes they're playing quick because their players are doing rogue stuff on the map. These teams are a little bit more disciplined, and Thieves probably were the fastest of the bunch, but they really struggled to get team slaying, and so they're getting that speed, they're pushing out, they're not really getting anything to show for it, so they're getting into adverse situations and respawns. But in this major cycle, they're able to get those kills, win those ones, and so their system looks very good in how they're matching up with these teams in Hardpoint. The thing I'll say for Thieves, and they still have a few things to work on, are some of the kind of edges of the map pool. They need to kind of flush things out. When you're going to play an Optic or a FaZe, they're not really going to square up with you on a Berlin Hardpoint. And so you take Berlin Hardpoint out, you look at the strength of FaZe and Optic on Gavitu. For Thieves, rounding out to Tuscan is great. You're looking pretty good. But if you can start to get a little bit more confidence on Bocage, they haven't played it a lot this season. The last time they played it was in the Major 4 final. I kind of then really like them if they can figure that map out of having probably the best hardpoint map pool of any team in the tournament. Otherwise though, like they're going to play a lot of Gav Tuscans, which is fine, but there are a lot of dangerous other Gavitu teams out there, and Tuscan's a very 50-50 map in the way it plays, so suddenly the map pool becomes pretty tight when you play those 2 teams. And it's a similar story if we get and talk about the SNDs. I think with SNDs, I'm kind of segmenting through how I look at their sort of map pool between the first half and second half of the season, because I think the overall numbers there are not really going to show sort of the full picture. Like this team has played a lot of Berlin SND in the last like 2 months, which is fine. That's a map that's going to get played a lot if you look at the teams that are at champs. The one thing I say, looking from my perspective, is the Bocage SND has not been played a significant amount in the last couple of stages, but it is a map that may end up squeaking in if you're playing a FaZe or an Optic. Again, I kind of see additional paths. If you're Thieves and you get the option to play like a Berlin Tuscan, you take that, but some of these other teams are good Berlin teams, and if they're able to get you on Bocage somehow with the way the vetoes go down, I don't think that's super likely. You know, that could be a potential area of weakness for Thieves because of some other teams' strengths on that map. And then finally, just historically, something to note with this Thieves team is this season they've actually been really bad at game 5s. They played 13 game 5s and they only won 4 of them, so they're 4-9. Like that's not amazing. For reference, if we look at sort of teams overall, and shout out IOU Turtle for the sheet, you see that they're near the bottom in Game 5 win record so far this season. The only other teams that are really kind of close to them, Paris is out, Seattle's still in this tournament, New York's still in this tournament, Optic's still in this tournament. But once you kind of get above that, it pretty much as you see like 7 and 8, 5 and 4, 4 and 3, 7, 5, like it's pretty much 50-50 at that point. For Thieves, they've lost a lot of tough Game 5s, and when you get to champs, you expect some of these series to be a grind. So leaning on sort of your recent success and carrying that form into Game 5s. Otherwise, you know, the record kind of says that maybe that might be a little bit less than a coin flip for them if they get there. All right, so let's talk a little about LA Thieves and sort of the bracket and sort of my kind of final thoughts and prediction of where they're going to fit. So they play Boston first, and honestly, this is a super tough matchup for Boston. They haven't had a lot of success for Thieves this year, and by a lot, I mean 0. As you take a look here, both matches that they have played at majors and major qualifiers, obviously excluding Pro-Am, have been not close. They've been 3-0s. Map pool is really tough for Boston. I would say that the switch of the Boston might be able to do in this series is maybe don't play them on Gavin 2 hardpoint. I feel like that's just, you're just asking for trouble, and neither of them have been super close. We'll see if Boston to switch up. But I still have Thieves in this probably in 3 or 4 maps. I just don't see how Boston really has a chance here unless Thieves pull up and have like a really sort of bad day. Everybody's not really shooting straight. Teamwork's not there. And even then, I somehow think Thieves might grind out in 5, but we'll see. And then for Thieves, you're going to have to play either Optic or Toronto. Both interesting matchups. Both teams that have similar-ish map pools. I think if Thieves get Toronto somehow, I like Thieves probably in 4 maps against Toronto. Optic's a little bit more interesting to me because of some of the map pool overlap and some, I think, the crowd dynamics that would play into factor. We're going to be in LA. There's going to be a lot of Thieves fans there, but Optic fans travel well. Like, it'd be a super sort of emotional, loud room on Friday. I'm going to stick my head out a little bit out here. I think Thieves will probably get it done against either team. I think Optic's probably the harder out, but I just think Thieves probably, like the Thieves Optic phase trio probably are coming in probably the highest floor, I think, in terms of performances, because it hasn't been that many weeks since Major 4. They probably didn't really get that much time off after the event. They were back on the grind. So I feel pretty confident on them making it to Saturday Winter Finals. Now, the question to me is, are they able to beat a phase or New York teams that they've had wins and losses against at land? I think that's very 50-50. Like the key thing for me is I feel like if the tournament goes the way the tournament should, Thieves, Optic, and FaZe are probably going to be there as we get towards the late stages of Saturday into the finals on Sunday. So how those 3 teams kind of dynamic against each other is a little bit of a question mark to me. All very similar map pools that we discussed kind of in the beginning of the video, and a lot of it will come down to their forms for earlier on in the week. My final thoughts on Thieves team is, look, like regardless of what happens in champs, this is a good season. You won an event, you kind of vindicated your investment in the CDL. If you're LA Thieves, you sort of vindicate your strategy this season. Last season, you made a lot of roster changes, didn't really work out. Some of the decisions were a little questionable this season. Even when you had bumps in the middle of the season, you kept the roster together. You brought in Shane, which brought in sort of a new dynamic on the coaching staff. We've seen that be successful in other teams in the past as well. And they're coming this event as the hottest team form-wise. So regardless if you get, 3rd or 4th or 2nd or 1st, and I'm sure they'd be disappointed anything other than 1st, I think this has been a great season and playing to continue to build on going in the next one. And that'll do it for this video, guys. Let me know what you think about Thieves. Like, do you agree with me that they're sort of the hottest team coming in? Do you think they're going to fall victim to sort of this thing we've seen so far this season where teams win an event and they fall off? Let me know in the comments what you think. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel. We still got 2 more videos left, FaZe and Optic. Those will be going out later this week prior to the event. And then once the event is over, we'll be talking more off-season stuff, starting to really get into the roster mania stuff as some of these teams make changes going into the later parts of the summer. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.